The story begins with a teacher named Karina, who is heading to a new school where she has been assigned. Upon arriving, she meets one of her colleagues. Shortly after, the school principal holds a meeting with the teachers and introduces Karina to them. At the end of her first workday, Karina leaves the school and goes to a store. While there, she secretly takes a cosmetic item and leaves without paying. When she returns home, her husband tells her that he needs to go on a work trip for a few days. The next day, Karina starts her first day of teaching at the new school. In class, she introduces herself to the students, telling them that she is their English teacher. After the classes are over, a student named Nick goes to the school office to ask a staff member about university scholarships. He learns that to qualify for the scholarship, he must achieve a high rank in the exam. Nick thinks about taking private classes to perform well in the exam and secure the scholarship, but he faces a problem. He cannot afford the cost of these classes. After school, he works at a restaurant to pay for his university tuition. On the other hand, Karina receives a message from her husband that upsets her. Feeling emotional, she leaves the house and goes to a bar. Coincidentally, Nick also goes to the same bar with his friends and sees Karina there. Karina meets Nick's friends and interacts with them respectfully. Later, when she gets a chance to talk to Nick alone, he explains his difficult situation and asks for her help in preparing for the scholarship. Karina agrees to help him, and they decide to meet the next day. After their conversation, Karina offers Nick a ride home. Before leaving, she mentions that her brother, who is a police officer, lives in the same neighborhood as Nick. The next day, Karina prepares for her first tutoring session with Nick. Her husband, who has just returned from his trip, asks her where she plans to go on her day off. Karina lies, saying she has a meeting with a new colleague. Karina meets Nick at a restaurant, where they hold their first private lesson. In the next scene, Nick and a group of students gather at a friend's house for a big party. However, the party is abruptly interrupted when the police arrive, and everyone is arrested. Nick realizes that the officer who arrested him is Karina's brother. He asks the officer to call Karina, knowing she can vouch for him. In the following scene, Karina rushes to the party to help Nick. She pleads with her brother to release Nick and not arrest him, explaining that this could jeopardize his chances of getting the scholarship. After being released, Nick apologizes to Karina for all the trouble he caused. The next day, Nick is getting ready for another session with Karina, but suddenly Karina shows up at his house. They go to a university together, and Nick, excited to see the campus, tells Karina that he dreams of becoming a doctor to help others. At the university, Nick meets the older brother of one of his friends. He invites Nick and Karina to a party. Karina tells Nick that this will be the first group party she's ever attended, as before her marriage, she always had to take care of her alcoholic father and never had the chance to go to parties. In the next scene, Nick returns home feeling happy and thinking about Karina. He sends her a message on Instagram, telling her that he enjoyed being with her at the party. However, Karina deletes the message after reading it. When Karina gets home, she discovers that her husband has spent all the money they had saved and bought musical instruments. The next day, Nick notices that Karina has accepted his friend request on Instagram. He then visits Karina again and admits that he enjoys being around her. Nick tries to get closer to Karina, but she quickly asks him to leave her room. In the next scene, Nick apologizes to Karina for everything he's done, but she's still angry with him and tells him that she might lose her job because of him. Nick then begs Karina to help him with his studies, as he can't afford the tuition for classes. Karina agrees to help and tells him that they need to be careful so no one finds out. In the next scene, Karina gets upset at the party when she feels ignored by Nick. She sees him dancing with another girl and becomes very angry. She then follows Nick to the bathroom and asks him why he didn't come to class today. Nick confesses to Karina that he can't stop thinking about her, and when they're alone, he finds it hard to control himself. They then return to the party, and Nick notices that Karina is looking at him, signaling him with her hand to follow her. Nick follows Karina until they reach her car. This time, Karina decides to give in to her feelings for Nick without any hesitation. In the next scene, Nick sends Karina a message saying that he can't stop thinking about her, but Karina reads the message and deletes it. The next day at school, Nick is worried about how Karina will react. After class ends, Karina tells Nick that the exams are almost over and advises him to focus more on his studies. She then suggests that they meet tomorrow, and Nick feels relieved and happily agrees to see her. The next day, Nick waits for Karina to arrive at their usual meeting spot. When Karina arrives, he asks her to change his name in her phone so that no one finds out about their relationship. That evening, Nick returns home to take care of his younger brothers as their mother is at work. Meanwhile, Karina goes out with a colleague, but she starts to feel like she wants to see Nick. She goes to the restroom, calls Nick, and tells him she wants to meet with him that night. However, Nick apologizes and tells her that he has to take care of his brothers. Upset by Nick's response, Karina reluctantly returns to her colleague, but she suddenly receives a message from Nick asking her to meet at their usual spot. When Nick sees Karina, he tells her that he feels their relationship has become one-sided. However, Karina reassures him that she has fallen in love with him too. A few days later, Karina seizes the opportunity and decides to spend her 2 days off with Nick at a cabin. She then lies to her husband and goes on the trip with Nick. That evening, Karina talks to Nick about her childhood and her mother, who passed away from cancer. The next morning, Karina receives a call from her husband, and Nick feels jealous. That night, Karina tells Nick that she will soon be starting university and might fall in love with one of her classmates. However, Nick disagrees and argues with her, insisting that it will never happen. The next day, they return to the city and resume their daily activities. Karina then meets with a colleague and tells him that she went to a conference for the weekend with an old friend. However, her colleague accuses Karina of lying and cheating on her husband, convinced that she was with her secret lover. Karina then confesses to her colleague that she spent her vacation with one of her students. Her colleague is shocked by this revelation and confronts Karina, scolding her for having a relationship with a student. Karina becomes angry and tries to convince her that the student is of legal age, but her colleague isn't convinced and tells her that she should report it to the police. Well, the story of Karina and Nick has reached a critical and complex point, and it seems that there are many exciting and dramatic twists ahead. I'm sure you're just as eager as I am to see what happens next. So, don't miss the upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to follow the channel and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to know what you think will happen to Karina and Nick. We really appreciate your support, and we can't wait to see you in the next episode. Until then, take care of yourselves, and we'll be back soon with the next part.